Good morning. I have just popped my Christmas cake in the oven. So there's no panic. We've got 7 hours to wait until that's due out. So plenty of time to come in and talk a little bit about die cutting today. So hello. My name is Helen Jennings. I'm a Stampin' Up demonstrator based here in the UK, and Wednesday morning is our slot for going back to basics. What I'm fiddling about trying to do is just trying to share this across to the Stamping Starters group. So as I say, today we're going to be thinking about die cutting. Now, when I first started card making, if you'd have gone to a back to basics, there's absolutely no way we would be looking at die cutting this early on in the series, because it really was something that was only just sort of coming into people's radar. I had a really tiny die cutting machine one Christmas quite early on. That wasn't anything like as sort of sophisticated as some of the die machines we've got now, and it was just, there just wasn't something that was around very much. But today, when you're card making, whatever you're looking at, whether you're picking up a magazine, whether you're watching YouTube videos, whether you're watching things on the television, when it comes to card making, scrapbooking, those sorts of things, you will see die cutting everywhere. So much earlier on, it becomes something that you need to be asking the question, is this something that I need? What's it all about? Tell me a bit about die cutting. So that is why I thought I would talk about it today. We talk about a bit of die cutting, and I'm going to bring in my die cutting machine in a minute. At the moment, Stampin' Up, because obviously I am a Stampin' Up demonstrator, so I do talk mainly about Stampin' Up products, and we do have lots and lots of beautiful dies and embossing folders, but we don't at the minute have a die cutting machine in our range available to buy. There is one that's being developed, and we're all very excited by that. I haven't seen anything of it. I've just sort of heard little bits about it, but not a great deal. But we know that that is in development and will come to us sometime soonish. I don't think it's an immediate thing. As I say, it is very much under development. Up until the end of the last catalogue, we always stocked Big Shots, and it is actually Big Shots, Sizzix Big Shots, that I have in the main. I do have one other A4 machine, but I have to say that it's in the back of a cupboard, and it very, very rarely comes out. Hi Chrissy. I never bring it out the cupboard really. But there are lots and lots of die cutting machines available on the market. You can get little tiny ones that you can take around with you and just hold little dies. You can get the sort of standard 6-inch width platforms, which are the ones that I've got in various makes and forms. You can get A4 ones. You can get machines that have got a 12 by 12 bed on them. You can get electronic machines of all varying sorts. There is just no end to the sorts of machines you want. So really what machine you go for will depend largely on lots of things. Do you struggle to wind a handle? Well, then you might be needing to think about an electronic machine. Do you want to carry it with you? Well, then you might want a small machine, but you're going to be limited to the dies that you can use in that. Are you a quilter? Do you want to put big dies, big fat dies through it? If you do, you need a machine that will take those. But let's get my machine out and let's talk a little bit about machines. Now, as I say, they're all going to be slightly different. They will all have different sandwiches and things. And we'll talk a bit about sandwiches in a minute. That's right, I've got lots of little bits of paper on mine. So you'll have different sandwiches for your dies, for your machines. And looking at that, I appear to be a plate down for this one, but that's okay. I've got more. I've got another set of plates on my table. Just don't know where it's gone. Ah, there it is. There's our second plate. So yeah, you'll have different sandwiches, you'll have different plates, all of those sorts of things. But every machine will come with its instructions telling you what you need to do to cut whatever sorts of things. I'm going to talk a little bit about, I'll sort of talk you through in terms of the big shot. Most things apply across the board. As I say, there might just be little tweaks, but each machine will come with its instructions and all of those sorts of things. So let's go back to basics. As I said, when I first started, there weren't really dies and things around particularly. Some of the first sorts of dies that came out were the Sizzix dies, but they weren't the little thin dies that we're used to seeing. They were these great big thick dies. Now, when I first started with Stampin' Up, which has been 6 years ago this week, we did some of these Sizzix Bigs dies. We don't anymore. But the Bigs dies were where it all started. And if you look at the Big Shot machine and the Bigs dies, you will see that one Bigs die, one of these big fat dies, your 2 plates, is the perfect sandwich for going through your machine. That's what the machine was designed for. It was designed to take these big dies. Now, these big dies are still available on the market, and one of the reasons that they are still available on the market is that different from your standard little dies that we'll look at in a minute, these are steel based dies. So you've got like this spongy layer on the top, but if you push down gently on that sponge layer, you will find the steel outline in there. Now, because they are steel based dies, they create far more pressure and far more cutting power. So these steel based dies will cut through about 6 layers of cotton fabric. They will cut through quite big chipboard, quite reasonable thickness of sort of chipboard type things. They will cut through leather. So all sorts of materials that your standard dies won't cut through. These Bigs dies will. Oh dear, you're always on the train, I'm sorry. These Bigs dies will cut through lots of layers. So you'll quite often see these Bigs dies for quilters. So they'll often be quilting shapes, because if you can imagine, if you're a quilter and you need hundreds of little, I don't know, hexagons to make a quilt, if you could be cutting out 6 at a time, that's a lot easier than cutting them out 1 at a time by hand, and knowing that they're all going to be of uniform shape and size and all of those sorts of things. So these Bigs dies are very much still available. As I say, quite often it'll be either aimed at quilters or people that are doing mixed media type things that want to cut through things other than just paper and card, because these things will munch their way through lots of other things. So they are still incredibly valuable, and as you can see, I have some of my Bigs dies that I've hung on to. This is a really this like banner one, so this is really lovely if we're making banners. I can cut out quite a few sort of chipboard banners at any one time, and then you can decorate them. Really useful. So Bigs dies, and that is what this machine was made for. So obviously when they then started bringing in these little dies, so I've got a whole selection here, when they started bringing in these thin dies like this, obviously that's much thinner, and that and these 2 plates are just not going to do it. They're just not going to cut anything. So they needed to come up with something to make up for this bulk just here. And what they came up with, and I've got here a set from if you go out and buy a Big Shot now, you will get a platform a bit like this. You've got the multi-purpose platform. So this platform, along with these 2 plates and your thin die, gives you the right sandwich to go through your machine. So that's where your platform came from. The whole idea of this platform is that it was created to make up the difference from those steel based dies, so that your dies would work in your machine. Now if you go and buy a big shop from, I don't know, a craft store or online or whatever, this is the sort of platform that you will get with it. You will get a Sizzix multi-purpose platform, and on it you will find all the instructions that you need. So it tells you that if you're putting dies through your machine, then you need to have it on tab 2. Open it up to tab 1, and we're looking at if you are embossing with the impressions pad, or if you are doing some of the embossing folders, and then open it right up and there's embossing folders. So mostly embossing folders is just no tabs open. If you are embossing a die, you want tab 1. If you are cutting a die, you want tab 2. That's the general rule of thumb. But the absolute general rule of thumb is if you go to roll your sandwich that you have created through your machine and it will not go, you're having to force it, don't. That is the sort of tell. And as you get used to your machine, you will know that that is not going to go through. I've got something wrong. I've got too much of a sandwich there. I need to take some filling out. Or you'll think to yourself, that's going through much too easy. I haven't got enough of a sandwich there. I need to add some more filling. So it is all done by pressure. So how these machines work, and I don't think there's any variation on any of them, is that they have a set of rollers under here and here. So you've got a roller in the top, you've got a roller in the bottom, that as you turn the handle, your bed is fed through those rollers, and it is all done by pressure, which is why it's important that your sandwich is right. You need the pressure right for the rollers to press down on your die, to press it into the card and to cut your image out. So it is all about your sandwich, and that is where your different die machines will vary, and it will tell you about what sort of sandwiches you need for what. So this is a traditional big shop platform with your 2 acrylic plates. I also have here one of the Stampin' Up. Mine are looking very loved. This was the Stampin' Up multi-purpose platform with the thin die adapter. So for these, if you've got this combination of platforms, if you've got the Stampin' Up ones, you need your platform, your big shop platform, you need your your thin die adapter, and then you need your 2 acrylic plates. And again, one of my acrylic plates has gone walkies, so you need 2 acrylic plates to go through your machine to cut a die. If you are embossing, you just take out your thin die adapter and you just use your big shop platform. So for most die cutting, you just need everything. If you're embossing, you take out that platform. There are also variations, and these variations tend to go across the board as well. And this is a magnetic platform. So magnetic platforms are magnetic. Your die sticks to it, which means that if you're coming to line up a die around an image, it's really useful because it holds your die in place. So your magnetic platform is the width of your base plate and your thin die adapter. So you just need that one platform and your 2 plates. Again, other machines will have something similar. Might have a magnetic shim, might have a magnetic plate, but there's normally some sort of magnetic option on most machines. The other option that you get, now these are the Sizzix ones that I've got here, are options for embossing dies rather than cutting them. So this is the 2 different mats that you're able to get for the Sizzix machine plus the special plates. So you use this in place of one of your acrylic plates to create the right sandwich for embossing dies rather than cutting dies. So lots and lots of different variations of platforms and things for your machine. But the place that you start is with your machine. So if you think that die cutting is a way to go, you need to get your hands on a machine. Ask people, ask around, ask people what they like to use. Think about your options. Do you want to be able to take it out and about? You can now get big shots that fold up. Have you got a lot of space to store it in? How, you know, how neat do you want it to be on your shelf? Do you need it to be electronic? There are all of those sorts of questions to ask when you're choosing your machine. And then you get lots and lots of different options in dies. So let's have a look at just some of the dies that we've got. So these lovely heart dies here. You've got some dies that sort of like outlines. So these sort of will cut you a shape, if you like. So this will cut a heart with a bit of a stitched edge. This would be a heart without a stitched edge. And I think if we turn these over, there's different hearts in here. These are all stitched and some of them are scalloped. You've got that nice long die there. So they will be dies that cut you an outline. They will actually cut just a shape for you. And shape dies are incredibly useful. So we have things like the layering ovals. So all these different sizes of ovals that you can layer up on top of each other. These ones are extremely useful and well used. These are stitched shapes. We've also got stitched rectangles. We've got stitched stars, stitched labels, lots and lots of stitched shapes. So those are your sort of like basic shapes that you can stamp images onto, you can stamp sentiments onto, you can make frames with, do all sorts of things. Incredibly useful. And then you get your dies that are more specific, if you like. Just dropped one on the floor, we'll find that in a moment. So here I've got this beautiful butterfly die here. This is just a beautiful ornate butterfly. Just absolutely stunning. So that will cut you out all of these butterflies. If we flick this over, there is another butterfly there. And if you cut both of those sets of butterflies out, the one sits in the other and you get like a bit of a border. I don't know whether you can see that die there and this die here. You get sort of like a border effect with those two dies together. So those are just really ornate and really beautiful. You get lots of little butterflies in here that you can use for embellishments. You've got things like swirls and leaves that you can use to decorate cards. So those are really ornate dies. So you've got your basic shapes, you've got your dies that are a bit more ornate. You can get things like dies that create boxes, dies that create bags, sort of all those sort of different 3D dies you can get. And then this one, I've picked up this Best Catch stamp set. So we've got a stamp set that's got things like this fish in and this hat and this basket. If we open up this set of dies, then we've got the dies that will cut out our shape. So there's our little basket to cut out. There's our fish, so we can stamp and colour him in and then cut him out. Even this man with his fishing rod, we've got a die to cut him out. So you've got dies that will actually cut out different shapes. So many beautiful dies. Now let me have a little look and see. There are also dies that will emboss as well as cut. So rather than just cut out a shape, they will also emboss a shape, or they will cut into a piece of card, and it just is endless, the sorts of different dies and things you can get. So as I say, in this day and age, whereas once upon a time I would be saying, you know, there would be I would really like a die cutting machine, but that's something for a lot further down the line. In this day and age, I think it's something that's become more and more something that people invest in early on in their card making journey, and you know, because of that, prices of die cutting machines and things have come down. When you first buy your plates, your acrylic plates, when you first get your machine, these will be pristine. They will be sort of see-through, and beautiful. And yeah, so this one is slightly newer. You can see how much clearer that one is than say that one, and that's because my dies have been cutting into it. It's quite nice to try and save one to be slightly cleaner, so try and keep one on the bottom and one on the top so that you've got one that's not being cut into, but that doesn't always work. You're always going to forget, put it in the wrong way. It happens, and particularly for me with classes and things, you know, people get them in the wrong way. That's not a worry. But these are consumables. These will last you quite a long time. I mean, obviously mine will go a bit quicker than yours because they're used on a far more regular basis. But over time they will warp slightly. So in order to prevent that, keep turning them around, turn them over, and keep putting them through the machine different ways just to keep them sort of flattened out. They will get, as I say, really marked like that, and eventually I think the one I've got in the other room, otherwise I could show you, eventually they will crack. They might suddenly crack all the way across, or you might find a crack appearing, and you know, eventually you'll need to replace them. But that's not anything to worry about. Also, when you first get your machine, you might sometimes find that it makes quite alarming cracking noises, particularly when they're new, and lots of people get very frightened by that. Do not be frightened by that. They will make cracking noises. It is just that die cutting into these plastic plates. It's all bedding down. It's not anything to worry about. You've not broken it. You've not done anything wrong. That is just the way that it goes. So let's see if we've got some little oddments of card, and let's do a bit of die cutting. So what is it all about? Let's grab one of these basic stitched shapes. I've got a stitched oval here. So I have got my base plate and my thin die adapter. I could, you know, I've got it set up to cut a thin die. So here is our thin die. If you look at your dies, you will find that they have got a raised edge. It's not sharp, you're not going to cut yourself on it, but it is a raised edge. Now your raised edge you need going into your card. Now people will often ask me, which way round should it go? Should it go with your card laid down and your die on top facing down, or should you have your die facing down and your card laying on top like that? The answer to that question, as to many questions, is yes. It really depends, one, on personal preference, and two, on what you're doing. Obviously, if you have got a stamped image on here and you want to line your die around it, you're going to want to have your card down and put your die on top. I mean, I think even if you're taping it down, it's really useful to be able to see that your die is outlining your image. So in that case, absolutely always I would have my card on the base and my die facing down. If I was doing multiple cuts and I was trying to, you know, get as much out of a piece of card as I possibly could, and I wanted to see where I was squeezing that little piece in, then again I would have it so that my card was down and my die was cutting into it. And in a majority of cases that is absolutely fine. If I have got a really, really detailed die and it perhaps hasn't cut through properly on the first run through, I might well swing it over so that it's facing this way, so that you've got it so that the card is on the top. Sometimes that just gives a little bit more pressure and allows the machine to cut just that little bit better. As I say, general rule of thumb, not much difference. Occasionally it is worth swinging it round and just having it so the die is facing upwards and your card is laid on top. When you have got really, really detailed dies, it may be that on the first run through it doesn't completely cut through. But I always say to people, you know, can you imagine trying to cut that out by hand? If you have to run it through 3 or 4 times in order to get it cut out, it really is still much, much simpler than trying to cut that out with a craft knife and a ruler or whatever. So sometimes you do need to run things through a few more times. The other thing you need to do is you need to get to know your own personal machine They are all little individuals. They all have their own little characters. Hi Mags. And they will all have sweet spots where they cut better. Quite often it's this corner. Quite often it is this top sort of left corner that is the sweet spot on machines. That's the point at which it cuts at its best. Not always. Yours might be the top right corner. It might be in the middle. But to the sides and to the front of the machine is often where you're going to get your best cut. So when you're laying your card and your dies on your machine, I would always, and sort of you don't think about these things, I do it automatically now, I would nearly always put it there to run it through the machine, knowing that that is going to be the spot where it gets the greatest pressure. By having your dies as near to the top as you can do, that will give you the greatest pressure. If you have lots of dies on here that you were going to cut out, if I'd got one there, one there, one there, one there, one there, you might find that these bottom dies don't get quite as much pressure as the top one. So you might need to swing the whole thing round and put it back through the other way. You will get to know your machine. You will know where is a good place for it to cut, where it isn't. If your machine is particularly, it may be over time that it's not quite got as much pressure on it as it used to have, then simply take a piece of scrap card, lay it on the top and use that, and you'll see people talking about using a shim, and that's all that means. It means adding in another layer of card to make up that pressure, to make up that sandwich so that the pressure is right for it to run through. So yeah, look for your sweet spots, know your machine, don't be frightened to turn it around. So if you've got a particular die that isn't cutting out very well, so perhaps you've run it through once, and this one I'm sure will. I nearly always run it back just because it brings it back to the same side as me, no other reason than that. If I'd found that that hadn't cut, and I have absolutely no doubt that that will have done, look, at if you turn it over you can see that it's cut, but if I'd found that it hadn't cut, I might even just pop it out of that. I would perhaps turn it round, put it through another side, perhaps put it through on an angle, you know, just try tweaking it round a little bit until it does cut. As I say, with these are going to cut out beautifully every time, and I don't even need to have run that back. In fact, with these dies, with these basic shapes, I could have had 2 thicknesses of card and that would still have cut that out. So do play with your machine, do get to know it, do get to find out, you know, don't be frightened to turn round dies, put it through a different way. Obviously you don't want it hanging over the side of your bed, that's the width. You don't want your dies hanging over the edge because they will bend. The other thing you need to be really careful of is if you are die cutting more than one thing, make sure that your dies don't cross over like that. If your dies cross like that, as you run it through the machine, one die will cut into the other die and may well ruin it and mean that you're not able to get that die cut. So yeah, so don't do that, don't overlap. So be very careful if you're putting multiple dies on something that your dies don't overlap, because the one will cut into the other. So let's have a little recap. You've got your different plates. Every machine is going to be different. Every machine will have its instructions, but your machine works on pressure. So you always need to make sure you've got your right sandwich in order for it to cut whatever it is that you're trying to cut. You can on the market get, I mean, we talked earlier about the really big steel dies. You can also get deeper metal dies that will also cut fabric and things. Obviously Stampin' Up don't stock those because we don't stock fabric, so there wouldn't be much point, but you can get those on the market as well. You can get the thin deep dish dies that will cut fabric. So you've got your always think about your sandwich. So for die cutting you want your base plate, and normally it's 2 clear plastic plates or different coloured plastic plates to run through your machine. Check your machine for your sandwich. Find your sweet spots. Find where's the best place to lay your dies so that they cut through. If they don't cut through the first time, you know, run them through a couple of times. Try putting them in a different spot. Try turning them over so that they're facing, the dies facing up. All of those little tricks and tips will help you with your die cutting. But I think if you're card making in this day and age, then absolutely a die cutting machine probably is something that fairly early on you're going to want to have in your collection, because there are so many stunning dies and there are so many stamps that have dies that coordinate. Obviously Stampin' Up!, that's one of their big things. We have lots and lots of beautiful dies that coordinate with our stamp set, so that you can stamp and cut them out, or stamp and cut dies that would coordinate with those stamp sets. So so many beautiful dies, so many beautiful 3D type dies, and we've not even started on the whole idea of embossing. We shall save that for a completely another day, but hopefully that's given you sort of the basics and given you some of the reasons why you would want a die cutting machine. As I say, we don't have one currently in our Stampin' Up! Catalogue, so I can't sell you one. I can sell you lots of dies to go with one, and it is a question of watching this space, because we do have a new machine in development and we eagerly await what that is going to look like when it comes to us. So obviously, if you have any questions, do pop them on. I would love to hear any questions. Do put in your tips and tricks for using your die cutting machines, and I will be back tomorrow to share some more projects, and I'll be back next week for another Duckie Stamping Starters Back to Basics.